All right. Happy Friday, everyone. We are back with another episode of Learning Tech Talks where we are exploring the landscape of learning technology, although we're going outside the traditional learning technology a little bit today while cutting through the fluff and getting your questions answered. And today I am joined by Kelley Steven-Waiss. I got it right? I did not forget.
Right.
I know I did. And we're talking about Hitch and what that means for this whole skill journey that we've been on, that so many of us have been on what that looks like. So I'm looking forward to jumping into that, having that conversation. But before we get started, we have to make this engaging and fun to get things kicked off. So Kelley, for you, I'm in my usual spot where I always am in Waukesha, Wisconsin. But why don't you tell everybody where you are? And for those of you who are just joining live, go ahead and let's get the comments rolling. Let us know where you're joining from as well. But how about you, Kelley?
So I am in the heart of the Silicon Valley, Chris. I am in Los Gatos, the Valley of the Cats.
The cats.
I know, which is awesome because I was a Wildcat. So I went to University of Arizona. So I am totally in the right place.
Okay. All right.
That's what I tell my kids. I moved here all because of that, right?
That you tell them that was the reason that you chose that location out of everything. Okay.
Then they asked why I don't have a cat, and I said, well, I have dogs.
Okay, you're a dog person. All right. Well, so look at this. We're getting into icebreaker questions that are way off script already, and we're only 1 minute and 59 seconds in. So now we know Kelley is a dog person. She has dogs, not cats, even though she lives in the valley. Cats.
That's right.
And she's a wildcat. Right. We know so much more about you now than we did before. All right. So then, question completely unrelated. In addition to all that background on you, Kelley, and I'm very interested to hear where you go with this one. And everybody watching, you can play along as well. This is going to be a little bit of a knowledge sharing in addition to an icebreaker. But for you, Kelley, what is one of your favorite productivity apps? And as you know, I was very generous in how we defined productivity. So I will give you that flexibility.
Yes. I know I sound much more interesting if it was about meditation. But everybody that knows me
we also joked that it could have been like a kid's app, right? Something that makes us more productive by distracting children.
Yeah, except the only thing my children ask me for is the credit card. So that would have to be Apple Pay or something. Please fill Apple Pay or Venmo or Venmo. For me, it's about WhatsApp, for communication. But I would say Airtable is one of my faves. And I have a coach. And what's very cool about the communication with my coach is that when I'm just thinking about, I want her to see this document, I could just upload it. Or if I get a thought that I don't want to forget to cut, because I only talk to her once a week, I can upload it to Airtable. So I really like that app.
See, for some reason, the name of the app, Airtable, I'm thinking like when you go out to eat, you book it, but it's not that.
Yeah, no. Although eating outside in the new COVID era could be the Airtable. You get.
I know that's what I'm like. Airtable, you're booking a table online. Okay, I guess.
But it's very cool. It's allows you to have real time. Upload docs as you're thinking of it. Take notes. Just share. It's kind of like Slack, but it's new. Check it out. So
see, I taught you something about how to do with PowerPoint earlier, and now I'm going to have to check out Airtable after this. Okay, so mine, I use tons of apps because I'm all about efficiency. But I thought about this, and I have the upper hand because I think about these questions before the show, so I have time. So the ones that I couldn't do without, at least the biggest one that immediately came to mind was Calendly. I could not function without Calendly. Just the automation of that. The only funny thing, this only happened once, but I had one person who got really huffy that I asked them to schedule the time, right? We were trying to coordinate time, and they were very like, what, you want me to go look at your calendar? I'm like, well, this makes it easy because then you just look at your schedule. They were very, I'm like, we can get admins involved if that's,
I don't want to voyeur on your calendar. So
yeah, I'm like, wow, okay. But for the most part, people love that. So that was the other one. And then the other one that I was recently introduced to, Nicole Papiano taught me this one, ClickUp, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this.
No.
But it's like a productivity project management, but not traditional project management. Pretty slick for collaborative stuff. So anyway, we've got Airtable, ClickUp, Calendly. I could probably list off a bunch of other ones, but we won't do that because we'll end up just talking about that all day. So let's shift gears a lot bit, and let's talk more about Hitch. And first of all, let's get into, you came from Here Technologies and now you're running Hitch. So what's the story behind that for those who may not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so one of the things when I was a CHRO, I was doing a lot of work in the future of work. So I was very interested in that space. I participated in a couple of things like Create with HR, spelling it Create with HR. And it was a group of 30 plus CHROs that really wanted to reimagine the function and adapt, right? We felt like maybe we were going to become irrelevant if we didn't start disrupting ourselves and thinking differently. So we were quite progressive, but we got together and we kind of hacked a lot of different topics, and it really stimulated my thinking about what pain points was I seeing as a CHRO that in the future of work, if we integrated sort of a point of view and utilized technology, we could do things differently. And one of the pain points was something that I personally experienced was being stuck in my job, like feeling like I was in a box.
Yeah, you're trapped.
Yeah, you're trapped. I mean, then I remember the exercise, write your job description. And I'm thinking, oh God, I don't do anything that this job description says that I do. I do so much more. And I do a lot of things that are invisible to people, like all the work with the board that I do. But I was thinking, probably a lot of people feel the way I do because I can see it in the engagement scores, and learning was broken. No managers wanted to send their people to training. So I started whiteboarding late at night after work. I started whiteboarding this idea, actually took a picture of it, which is super cool. Especially when you're commercial. I have that photograph. So I thought about, I think more companies could use this. When I left Extreme Networks and I went to Here Technologies, I actually pitched the CEO on this idea about how a talent mobility solution could stand up his agile transformation, how it could really evolve the company. And so he liked the idea and he let me go build a POC. So in February of 2017, we piloted this solution. We had people inside the company, borrowed time so that we were living what we were building, actually build this POC. Then we delivered it in the middle of June of 2017 to the enterprise, which was almost 10,000 people. And it was a huge success. In fact, without even full adoption in the first year, we saved, 111 FTE, and we were growing our engagement scores in the right direction. So it was really changing the way we were working. And it was all talent share.
It was like a mad scientist idea a little bit, right? Like you just brainstormed this thing up and said, you know what? I think we can do better. And then here said, yeah, let's try this. And you don't have a software background though, right? Like that was part of the pitch. You're not a coder on the side.
No, I am definitely not. Ask any of my people, right? I'm still learning engineering language. So yes, I'm coming through that learning curve. I think what it did teach me though is that what products really are, technology is just solving pain points, right? And it's delivering it in a digital way. So even though I can't speak digital and I don't code, in my mind, if I could describe what it is, what is the problem I'm solving, what do I believe could be solved with technology, and then I can communicate that to engineers and product leaders, they can help build what my vision was. And that's exactly what happened when I got on stage in June of 2016 in front of 350 senior leaders and said, hey, we want agile transformation. If we could build something like this, would you come, right? Would you come and participate? And people would, like, at the end of my presentation, I'm like, are you in? And they all stood up and said, yes. And then some people from the audience approached me later and said, hey, I want to build that. So great.
It's a really good point. And I think one of the things you're hitting on is something that I think anybody in our field could take. Well, there's actually two things that stood out about what you're talking about there. First of all, one, that question comes up a lot of, in this new digital age, does everybody in our field need to become a technologist? Do we need to know how to code? Do we need to do all this other stuff? And I agree that I don't think you have to go that far. You need to understand kind of what the problems are. You need to have a little bit of an understanding of how the technology can work, but you don't have to go all the way into it, as long as you're able to articulate, hey, this is kind of what you did, right? This is what we're trying to do. These are the problems I'm trying to solve. And I think what's interesting about your conversation on stage that everybody cheered for was the fact you didn't talk about it in HR language, right? You weren't saying, hey, we want to build talent and culture. It was we're trying to do an agile transformation. And I think that's something that makes it very tangible and realistic for people to say, of course I do, right? Of course I want to get behind that.
Yeah, and it's very important. And we were lucky that we got to innovate something from the inside that was a tool for us, right? So we got to learn a lot about that, and we got to test it out. I think, not every tool can then, there's a chat, you cross a chasm, right, between what is a tool and what becomes a commercial product. So, a tool can be created to be customized for one context, one set of issues. But what we realized is that, hey, this set of issues, this problem statement that we attacked and tested is the problem statement for many other companies. And when I was out talking on the future of work and showing, hey, this is what we were able to accomplish, there was a lot of people in the audience that were raising their hands and saying, wait a minute, I don't see anything in the market like that. Can I buy it? And then you go, wow, we should really commercialize this. And that becomes another learning curve for someone like me, is how do you build a tool for inside the four walls of an organization, but then how do you actually commercialize a product? How do you build something that has enough standard capability to take to market? And what does that process look like? And that was another curve to take. Okay. And then how do you market it and sell it and build a team around it? And so it was a great ride for me, a great story.
Even on your own transformation experience in and of itself, right? Like, I mean, this has been quite the transformation experience for your own personal development.
That's right. That's right. I think, one of the things that was really inspiring, I think, for other people and even for myself, because I went through a journey of what am I capable of doing by being a good talent architect and putting people around you, is that innovation can come from anywhere in an organization. And I think that nobody would expect that HR would code or build a tool. Right. I mean, that's just not something anyone would expect. And when I ended up being the chief innovation officer of the company and owning innovation enablement, I really felt like it was a great platform to be able to say, hey, any of you can have great ideas that you can bring forward, no matter where you sit in the organization, right? Yeah. And I have this great book on my shelf called What Do You Do With an Idea, right? Which is a children's book. And I remember doing a keynote at Here Technologies, and I read that book. That's probably for kindergartners to the entire audience. But at the end, it says, what do you do with a great idea? You change the world, right?
Yep.
And although it's meant as a message for children, that message is just as relevant for us, because no matter where you sit in the organization, no matter what your functional, and of course, this is what I'll get into what this means for Hitch, but you can innovate, right? You can have a great idea.
I love that, and I think it's an awesome story just because of that very thing. And I think this is what organizations need, especially right now. And a lot of times we paint ourselves into our own boxes, right? We go, well, I'm this, and this is what my role is, and this is what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, says who, right? You can do anything anymore. So I love the story, and I love let's transition it into Hitch itself, because I think the problem you brought up, and the story of how you went from, hey, we have this idea, it's a tool we're going to use here. Oh, that started to expand. Looks like this really solves some serious problems. Organization. Oh, wow, there's actually a big need in the market. So that journey that's been on really gets at the core of what you talked about before, which is the workforce. Many of the workforce, all levels, a lot of times are struggling to know, what do I do with my skills and my talents, and what skills and talents do I need to grow in? Which ones do I not? How do I make sure I'm making smart investments and that what I'm doing is, relevant to the future? So when that problem kind of came to light and you said, we're going to solve for it, then how does Hitch, if you were to say, so what is Hitch and how does it address that problem? How does it?
So one of the things that is staring right in front of us, sometimes innovation comes from things that are right in front of us, is that many organizations are sitting on talent gold, right? There's gold right underneath you, right? And what do we know about gold? It's rare, it's precious, it's valuable, it's hard to see with the naked eye, right?
Yeah.
We have to have a way to mine that gold in an organization. So if it's not visible to us, how can we expose it? And gold, I liken to skills, right? Okay. So if we can expose that gold that we're sitting on, which is, we don't need to go buy it on the open market. We're sitting on the gold mines. We're just not tapping into it, right? So if we can expose it and we can leverage technology to expose it, we can match that to work. And so I don't know. I don't think that prior to the technology, of course, of Hitch and some of these internal talent mobility solutions that we have today, that we were really exposing skills. I think that we knew the titles of people, but in order to really match people to units of work where they can be leveraged in what I call broad contribution, progression versus promotion, right? How do they progress? We have to see those skills. And I don't know if you want to light this up, Christopher, but I talked at Leap Tech about this, but the fact that skills are the common denominator. So what we're essentially doing with Hitch is we're enabling this inside gig, and we're doing that by a lot of us were focused on the external outside gig, right? But we don't want to lose people the outside. We need to create a marketplace on the inside where we expose people's skills in their profiles, which is, of course, Hitch is on one side profiles, the marketplace for project-based work and full-time opportunities where we make all the work transparent, and then the dashboards by which we visualize what I refer to as the skills supply chain. So I said skills are the gold, right? So we want to bring the gold to the surface. We want to visualize that, what skills are in highest demand and what skills are, what does our supply look like? Because if we can manage that talent asset, that gold in our organization well, we have competitive advantage. We're giving people great experience. And last but not least, the holy grail is the vector between getting the work done that the company needs to get done, so executing strategy, and between where the employee can contribute the greatest and have the most productivity. And so that's essentially what I talk about even in my book, is how do we create the inside gig, and how do we create an environment where we expose all of these skills.
Okay. Well, and I think a lot of people in the industry, right, are familiar with the gig economy, where we're talking about, right, people are freelancing, they're doing these things, they're finding these opportunities out here, and they're going out and doing it. This is essentially recreating that and making it feasible internally, correct?
Correct. Yeah, because it's the same concept. If you were to go on Upwork and participate in Upwork and market yourself for gigs that you would get on the outside, this essentially is a way to market yourself inside an organization. The notion that we are only the job that we're doing today is really a misnomer. If people just looked at me as a CHRO, they'd probably make assumptions, right? Oh, she knows comp, she knows benefits, she knows training and L&D, but she probably doesn't know like other things. And if you look in my background and then further into skills, I had run marketing, I'd done corporate communications, I had started a retail company, I'd worked in a retail industry, I'd done merchandising and operations. Like, nobody would ever know that by the virtue of the job I'm in. However, a platform like Hitch would expose, because you could search by skills, et cetera, might pull me up for a marketing campaign or an advertising campaign and say, hey, Kelley, these skills.
Well, the thing with it, and so there's two parts that I'll hit on. And actually, Vinod asked a really good question, so I'm going to dig into that too. But I think, right, we've operated historically off of, you talked about it before. We've had the job descriptions, which tell part of a story, but not even, I would say, a very good story sometimes of what the job really is. And then you have people's CVs, which kind of maybe tell you a little bit about what they know or what they do, but it doesn't really, I think what you're talking about is take it down to the granular level of, okay, they did these things, they were in these jobs, but what did they really do and what skills did it require? Because a lot of that stuff's transferable. Oh, you're in HR. Well, you're in HR, but you probably did many of the same things our marketing teams or our finance teams that you manage, but right, all these other things that don't necessarily come to the surface. And I think that's an important point to highlight, that's that whole, right, you're sitting on top of gold. Well, it's because historically we've just looked at, well, we have this, 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 and this without really seeing everything underneath. The gold's been hidden in the carbon or whatever.
Well, we always talk about jobs. We have been so focused on jobs, and jobs by themselves are a box, right? Yeah. There's stuff you put in the box and everything outside the box doesn't fit, right? So what we're trying to do is break it down to a common denominator. And I have a great slide in that deck you had that shows a math problem, and it says we're solving for X, right? So the common denominator of work is skills, right? Skills are what we're solving for.
X. I was a former math teacher. I get this stuff.
Okay, so you get it. So we're solving for X, and if we can solve for X, there's an infinite number of additional opportunities for people than if we just make an assumption, right, around jobs, because jobs by their very nature are ring fenced. And so once we go to skills as that currency, that common denominator, there are more opportunities for an individual to be matched to different projects, different full-time roles, and not to mention an internal ecosystem where we're really trying to build culture and no more kind of give to the whole person, right? Let them bring their best selves to work. I was just in a conference this week where the Chief Diversity Officer of Workday, Karen Taylor, said, we don't want them to bring their whole selves, but we want them to bring their best selves. And your best self is a combination of everything you've done and everything you're interested in learning. And so let's get to that, because it's not just what you can do now. In a modern enterprise, if we know what your motivations are to learn, we can actually match you to learning opportunities too. And since learning needs to be in the flow of work, right, we can match you, like, the old days, they had apprentices, right?
Yep.
It's just digitizing the apprentice format, right? And letting you shadow and draft behind somebody who has an expertise, because there isn't time to go learn a different way. And I also, Chris, I have the story about my dad, who was a sound editor.
Yeah.
And the fact that in a 30-year career, my father had to go from splicing film to digital sound. Well, that process today would be 3 years.
Yeah. It wouldn't, your skills no longer have a 30-year shelf life. They just don't.
No, not today. We have to, the muscle to be developed today in learning is to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So the people that will do the best in this modern way of working and participate in the inside gigs, et cetera, is how well they learn something new, they can unravel an old paradigm, and they can learn again. And because they will have this portfolio of a career where it's a bunch of these gigs put together, right? They're going to learn new skills, and they're going to have to unlearn the things that don't help them in the future. So it's actually a skill unraveling.
I love that you bring up the unlearning one, because I feel like that's one that often gets glossed over, right? And to me, that is a critical variable in being successful in this new world, because the reality is, if you don't learn how to unlearn things, it makes it even harder for you to learn new things, because you're still stuck in this, like, well, but I'm trying to figure out how to do it the way we did it before. And that's like holding me back, versus saying, no, take the principles of it, the foundation of it, but then dump it, right? You got to dump it and move, because now we're over here.
Disrupting yourself, right? You have to disrupt yourself. So we all have to, the unlearning process is about disrupting what you used to know and being able to unravel it, to learn, to open yourself up to learn something new. And everybody, I'll just take HR as a discipline. I think that part of the frustration in human resources has been that I'll use performance management, because every HR person goes, oh, when you talk about performance management, because you know this because you have 5 kids. Okay. So toddlers, Fisher Price has this great toy, and it's a yellow box, and it's got all these shapes, and it has the hard 3-dimensional shapes that get pushed into the
I know the little, we've got a bunch of these things, right?
So it teaches them hand-eye coordination, all this, and you watch a toddler put a triangle in a square, and they start shoving it in, and they can't get it in, of course, and they throw that toy like in the first 5 minutes because they're getting frustrated. In HR, we're taking the triangle and we're shoving it into the square, and we're getting really, really frustrated, and we're trying to reinvent performance management every 6 months. But the truth is that we need to bomb the whole thing and start over. We need to unlearn a lot of the assumptions that we've built HR process on have to break. So in my view, we are going to move. If you're going to move towards this inside gig concept, you also have to be willing, and you meet a company where they are, but you have to envision how to unlearn some things. Like, we're going to go to team-based rewards. We're not going to be on individual rewards, because Agile is going to be all about this dynamic teaming that's going to go on, right?
Let's incentivize the behaviors we want to see.
Exactly. Skills-based pay, gamified recognition, crowdsourced performance review. When you say this, it's like, oh gosh, we have to break a lot of stuff, right? It panics people, and we're not going to break it all at one time, but we need to be willing to break it over time, so that we don't keep shoving the triangle in the square.
I call it, my word for it is reimagine, right? Because for so long we've just iterated on top of things. And an analogy that I see is, right, you look at like a landfill. If you leave all the garbage and you just keep dumping more garbage and you're trying to build on top of it, it doesn't work. Versus it's like, you got to clean that stuff out and say, let's start fresh. Like, let's start fresh. And my question is always, what would we do if we could do anything? Because the same thing happens in learning and development. We're constantly trying to iterate on things. I like the little Tykes analogy, right? We're trying to jam the yellow toy in the square hole, and it's like, stop doing that. It's not even like, let's just throw the whole toy out and figure out what can we do with this triangle that we're trying to solve, because who says we even have to put it in the little orb anymore? Maybe we do something completely different with it.
Yeah, so, and that's why it's human-centered design. So design thinking that we've applied for decades to product development. And we call it human-centered design, but we never took design thinking into HR, right? And I'll tell you, when my team at Here Technologies started to incorporate design thinking in everything, so user-based design, where we're instead of HR, when I, because I've had a long career, when I was in L&D way back in the day, we would go off into our cave, we'd design this perfect thing, and then we'd unveil it for corporate, right? Ta-da! And they're all sitting there going, this isn't gonna help me, okay, and now what we do, at least what my team was doing in my last iteration as a CHRO, was let's ask the questions, let's figure out what problem we're trying to solve, let's let people try this on, okay, that didn't work, let's tweak it, and that made sure that whatever we were delivering was actually going to create shared value for the company, value for the individual. And it was such a different way of thinking, but it made our programs and processes much better.
That's the thing. It's right if you're unfamiliar with this kind of way of approaching things, and again, there's so many transferable things, right? It's not just a HR thing or a learning thing. It's like, this works anywhere. And a lot of times it can feel scary, like, oh, this is just so different, but it's like, it's actually easier, and you get a better outcome because you're actually solving problems for the people that you're there to support. So with that though, because we would probably get super amped up on all the it's amazing and it's so great. But the reality is, this kind of stuff isn't just cool, so we just do it and then bam, everything's fixed, right? Because we did talk about, hey, there's some work. And Vinod asked a really good question. And I'd love your insight on this, which is, right, so let's say somebody hears this and they go, yeah, okay, I get it. I need to bring our stakeholders on board, with an organization that may not be thinking this way so clearly, and maybe going, wait, you want to move our talent around? It sounds like a lot of work, and that's very different than the way we've done it in the past. How do you articulate
the value?
Because I think some people see it and they just go, oh, duh. Other people are like, they haven't unlearned it.
Yeah, the value is probably the most important conversation you have as you go to implement the inside gig. So let me share how we talk about the value. Sure. The value of untapped, unmined talent is that
talent gold.
Your talent gold, exactly, is so when you implement the inside gig, you are allowing for talent sharing across BU and functional lines, which have cost centers, right? So those cost centers are separate. We have built entire organizations around constraints. You have 50 people, 50 hours, and you need to get this done, right? And $50, right? Just a joke around, right? It's constraints, and that's how we manage finances. Once you start sharing talent across, now I'm going to say BU lines or cost center lines, you're creating cost avoidance. Cost avoidance in many categories. One, you're tapping into existing capacity that you would have hired a contract for, you would have gone to the outside for, and you're leveraging that on the inside. So by default, you've now avoided costs, right? You are also giving an opportunity for someone inside to contribute elsewhere. So your time to produce something or to handle a customer escalation has gone down. So you're saving money again. So time to revenue, time to innovation, right? Cost of hire. And you start adding these things up. And here, what we did in our first year was say, people are donating 20% time, 10% time, 50% time, and we're adding that up. And once you add that up on an average FTE fully loaded cost, so what is for us, if it's 200,000, which is a fully loaded FTE, if you're saving, 30%, 10%, you add that up, it's a math equation of cost avoidance. And that's not even factoring all the other costs, but it's an easy way to show the value. So if your average implementation for an inside gig, let's just say the technology cost you $200K, if the fully load per year, if the fully loaded cost of an FTE is $200K, you just save from one fully loaded FTE of talent sharing, you've already paid for the platform. Now, if you save over 100, right, your ROI is exponential.
Okay. Well, and I think it's just breaking down that math to that point of being able to showcase that, hey, this is, and again, I see this in a lot of different areas where sometimes we just take for granted how much money we spend on some of these things that we say, if we just simply reduce the spend through things like this, I mean, it's significant. It's not, a few $1,000s. We're talking hundreds, millions of dollars for large
turnover people, right? Turnover is a huge expense for a company to actually rehire those people back. And the number one reason why people are leaving is they're not having access to career development opportunity. And it's not, people go, oh, we're not paying them enough. Oh, we didn't promote them fast enough. Not necessarily. What we're finding is that people want learning. They want to be growing. And so when I said progression versus promotion, if we have a way in the jungle gym career methodology that we can actually tie pay to progressing on skills, so you're learning skills that are important to us as a company, we're going to pay you more for doing that. And we're going to make sure you're incented to do that. Okay. And so that's a way that even though we're not moving up traditional ladders, I can actually earn more pay by just maintaining my market. Contributing more. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's actually where I want to go next with this. But I think, right, you look at you talked about this cost avoidance is scratching the surface, and it is. It's only scratching the surface in the returns that you can get in this kind of stuff. Because again, when you think about employee engagement and employee utilization and even just culture stuff, right? These actually can feel like squishy metrics, but they really aren't. And the data is out there showing that this stuff is not. This is not stuff that doesn't have an impact on earnings per share or, annual revenue, things like that. And so while it can be harder sometimes to quantify that, I think it's important that, a lot of your workforce is struggling and they have so much more potential, but historically we haven't had really good ways to do anything with it, right? Sometimes we've said, well, you need to own your own development. I mean, okay, but what does that mean? What does that look like?
We have to provide the tools, though, for people. We have to provide the environment. And I think, I'm also a board director. And you mentioned metrics. One of the metrics that we talk about in the boardroom for productivity is revenue per head. And actually, I've been working with some university students on a very different metric for workforce productivity. That is more modern. It has different inputs because revenue per head is is really, it's too constrained, right, for where we're going as a modern enterprise. The fact that we're dealing with automation and other disruptions, the fact that we have to be more diverse and equal and inclusive, and the fact that board of directors are asking for what we call ESG metrics, environmental social governance metrics. And so we have to modernize our way we measure the success of an organization. And I think one of the number one things is how well you are leveraging the talent gold in your organization. And CEOs are going to be on the spot in the very near future to the board and saying how well they're leveraging their skills supply chain. What are you doing to ensure that we have the right assets from talent? We talk about inventory all the time, right? And product. But now it's going to be how well are you managing this talent asset that we are sitting on and forecasting what we need in the future so we don't get behind on our own competitive ability. So I think this is something we're going to see. I know I'm working on it. I'm sure there's other very smart people working on what will that new workforce productivity metric be.
Okay. Well, and for people in the learning industry, I think, one of the things that sometimes some of these topics, and one of the reasons I have, things outside of just the traditional learning tech on, is we need to start thinking beyond just learning and development. But the connection to this is actually feeding to our function kind of. So then how do we grow or how do we develop these things? Because now we have visibility into, and this is always the challenge for us is, hey, we need to have more development. And it's like, on what? What do we need to develop on, and where should we be focusing our lens? This then informs that decision. So instead of creating experiences, designing content that's not necessarily adding any value, it's actually tied to something we know is adding value. Now, the one other thing I want to jump back to, because you talked about this from an internal gig economy, and Vinod asked this question. So one of the incentives to this kind of thing is giving people opportunity to be able to grow without necessarily having to follow the traditional promotion chain. But at the same time, you're talking about crossing BU lines. And in organizations, you've got budgets, you've got other things. So how do organizations that are doing this well, how are they managing that from a financial situation so that instead of because this is the model that I've seen, just it works for a little bit and then people start getting, I think, annoyed, where it's like, hey, here's this special project. We're going to keep taking more from you, asking you to do more things, but there's really nothing in it for you. Like, you get to go do more work for us. Thanks. That will give you a nice little pat on the back. And the goal of this is to go beyond that and say, no, there's actual benefit to the employee as well. This isn't just for the organization to squeeze more out of their employees.
No, the very, very important distinction that I want to make, right, is that, we look at Hitch as the people's platform. This is their marketplace. It's their place where the company is transparent about the work and the opportunities for work. But it's the opportunities to learn and contribute and interact and participate and everything you would expect. It's connecting buyers and sellers, right? And the buyers are the talent, right? They're deciding what they want to participate in. So the WIFM for what's in it for me, right, for the employee, is the opportunity to learn and grow, which I said is one of the number one things that people are missing. Now, on the other side, remember how I said we had to disrupt pay, incentives, performance, all these other things. We need to, in order to hook people into ensuring their relevance and marketability as automation takes over, we need to incent them by saying, here are the 5 skill domains that are most important for our company. And if you're willing, John and Mary and Sue, to learn these skills, right, you're going to be not only more relevant to us, but you're going to be more relevant on the market. And let me show you why you could also be a data scientist, or why you could also do this. And if you participate and you get involved and you learn these skills, we're going to pay more for that, right? And we're going to ensure your ongoing relevance in this organization. So, and by the way, I'm mentioning technical skills. There's also a lot of soft skills that I tell my college student, like who said, I'm going to study accounting, and then we had a discussion about accounting. Accounting's really important if you go into finance, but there's a lot that's getting automated there. So understanding, but part of it is he needs to understand what's getting automated, how it's getting automated. Right. So we need to unveil that for people and share how to be marketable.
Okay. Well, and I think that's just it, right? It's bigger than just, and we talked about this before we went live, is for organizations, it's not just about, oh, let's go buy this platform and this platform will magically solve all of our problems, because there are all these other components that are connected to it to actually bring it to life. So with that, as you look at some organizations, as you start moving down this, or even when you implemented this as here, what were some of the things that, served as maybe not roadblocks, but speed bumps that organizations can, where it's like, all right, we're in, let's do it. And then the rubber hits the road and suddenly people go, okay, this is maybe more work than I thought. What are some of those things?
Well, there's a lot there, so I'm going to break it down into two things. So I want to ensure that everybody hears that actually you don't have to have all your process worked out before you implement this technology. The technology is actually a catalyst to make the changes that I've been talking about. Okay. So, it is not I have to fix skills-based pay and all these other things before I can implement. The number one roadblock to this new way of working is leadership mindset. It is the number one. And I'll tell you, this is why you do have to break incentives and other things as you move through the chain. Your job is to communicate to leaders what's in it for them. And I'll tell you, in my book, I talk about you get what you give, a whole chapter on it, right? This nature, it's almost even in the law of economics, right? And the three laws of economics, one is that it needs to be perceived as good for the individual, right? That is buying. And so for the leaders, the idea that instead of owning the 50 people that you gave them, because they all grew up in these very much about constraints. We built our finances on it, on constraints, is this idea of abundance, not scarcity, that actually you don't need to own your 50 people. You need to tap the 10,000 in the organization. And suddenly when that light bulb goes off, oh, wow, I can tap the whole company instead of just being constrained to my 50 people. Suddenly the world opens up for them. And I'll tell you, for the organizations that I'm now working with that are implementing this way of working, that are getting past this leader mindset issue through this you get what you give, now have this opportunity. They've turned on this technology to start innovating on pay, performance, learning, all these other things. So it is totally something you can get past, but is the number one thing that you run into, because people go, I want to hoard my talent, right? That's immediately.
Oh yeah, talent hoarding is a huge limiting factor. But exactly. I like your point about helping people flip that mindset from, well, I only have 50 people, and if my 50 people are spending 20% of their time on other things, that's less that I can have, versus saying, no, don't think about it that way. You're thinking about
it. The 80% that, so if they're giving 20% of their time, let's say, what do you think actually happens with the 80%? This is the big misnomer, is people go, oh, well, they're going to drop balls and they're not going to produce. And actually quite the opposite. What happens is that they're energized so much in the 80% that what you actually get net in the 80 is the 100%, that maybe even more than you were getting before. Because if you look at the engagement metrics on a global basis, right? Let's just say what the World Economic Forum and Gallup and all these guys that are talking about it, people are bringing 60% of themselves to work every day.
Right.
They're leaving 40% on the table. So if you add up 40% of a 10,000 person company, that's a heck of a lot of capacity that's not tapped. Now, why do people say they're busy? Why do they go, oh, I'm too busy, right? Sometimes they are legitimately busy. Sometimes they're not engaged and they're busy, right? But if you
they just don't want more of the same that they're not engaged in.
No, and take a page out of Reed Hastings' book from Netflix, and Patty McCord, is that when you treat people like adults, right, and you let them, quote, roam about the country, right, by making all this work transparent, you get exponential reward out of that. People do not get up out of bed every day and go, how can I screw up today? How can I contribute less today? Nobody does that. No human being really does that. So if you actually say, I know it feels like I need to control everything, but if I usurp some of that control, if I let people be self-driven, self-directed, I create the guardrails and the frameworks, but I let them participate in an open marketplace, I actually will end up doubling my productivity.
Yeah, you end up with more, right? You're not, and then that's the important point is you're not giving up 20%. You're not. You're actually getting more of the whole person by better enabling them. And I think the other thing you hit on that's important is what this does is it gives those guardrails, right? It's those guardrails because you can't just say, hey, everybody, go do your thing. Right. That's not, and actually, I don't think people even really want that because they kind of want to know, like, well, but for what? Like, for where? How can I? People struggle with that. And what this does is this gives them the framework to say, okay, hey, we're empowering you. We're empowering you within these guardrails, but it's for purpose, it's for benefit, it's for your overall good. And I think that's where flipping that mindset, it's not easy, but I think once people get it, like you said, the light bulb moment goes on and
it's clicks. Like children, for all the parents out there, we learned that children actually like having some rules. They won't tell you that, but it feels really safe. So as long as you create the safety of knowing what the rules are and that you give me the tools to find my way, participate, and I can make myself successful. You teach me how to learn, unlearn, relearn in the flow of work. And then I will give you company the best of me, right?
Yes. And
I think we've gotten the yellow toddler toy was that we tried to create from sometimes the Industrial Revolution 1.0 type of management methodology that we need to control everything. It needs to be driven by hierarchy. The command and control will work was this thing that we kept trying to push, and it's breaking people. It is going to break. You cannot manage people that way anymore.
No.
Not the way that the world is working. I think COVID was the great equalizer, right? Just to bring in something relevant, right?
Yeah, there we go.
all got thrown in the deep end of the pool at the same time. So for all the people going, that future of work stuff is for everybody else to try, like Mikey eating cereal.
We're not going to get there.
We'll wait and see if Mikey likes it and he doesn't die, and then I'll eat my cereal. It's like we said that's for everybody else to try. And then we found ourselves going, we survived. We survived not being in offices. We survived having to use all these tools. And now it's going to be the willingness to, because we had to write with our left hand for the last several months.
Right. We were forced to. We didn't really have a choice.
We had to. And now it's like, okay, well, we did something totally different and it worked. So now what? Should we go back to the way it was? Should we now that we did this experiment, should we actually try to incorporate some new things? And I think that the challenge now for all of us will be, how do we create learning and create culture and connectedness when we're now all remote? And maybe we don't all go back to offices. So technology will be the lifeboat in a lot of ways, and access to deliver some of the things in HR we've been talking about for a long time. The experience of the employee, the personalized, digitized experience. So it's like there's a lot of opportunity for us right now.
There is. And I think that's one of the biggest things. You look at what happened in 2020, and it didn't create something that wasn't there before. The folks that have been kind of staying in tune with it, this has been coming for a long time. I think we've been kind of trying to push it in the closet and shut the door and be like, just here, throw another deadbolt on it. And it just kind of hit a tipping point. And then COVID hit and cut the lock, and it just boom, right? We no longer had a choice. So I think that is kind of where we all are. And I think, the point you brought up earlier about, while technology isn't the solution, you also don't have to fix everything first to do some of this stuff, is an important point, even with what you look at with where we're at now with COVID, where it's like, look, some of us had to kind of force some new things in and bring in some new tech to get things started. I think the point that's important to remember with that, though, is that's not where you stop, right? You don't just stop with, well, now we have it, so what, we just kind of leave it and it does its thing. It's like, no, you keep, and I think that's what, when you look at what happened in 2020, that's what we need to do moving into 2020 and beyond, to say, okay, we were forced to do a bunch of things we were not in our minds ready to do, and we had no choice. We kind of rushed, we kind of brought some new things in. Now, how do we learn from that, unlearn what we don't need to use, and then just keep reimagining and keep growing that forward? And I think that's where, when what you're talking about and the capability of the tech can do, you bring it in, it can be the catalyst to start some of these things, to show, hey, wow, we weren't thinking about this. Hey, wow, this is something we maybe need to dump. It's about taking that next step and continuing that progress to really get the most out of the tech. That's right. And sometimes, the trying something new, and I definitely recommend, when we implement our technology, we start with a phase one, right? Phase one is to create the talent sharing in two divisions that have the most likelihood to share talent, right? And it creates the viral effect of this taking off, because I think when the other leaders see that the two leaders of those divisions were tapping so much capacity, their people are happy, they're like, they want in now, right? So for those of us that are the ones leading this effort from human resources or employee experience or L&D, it is a beautiful thing to watch, right? Because it's not something you have to force. You don't have to take the triangle and force it into the square for once. You actually can watch this go viral, see what your hypotheses were. For me, it was the most beautiful part of the whole thing, right? Yeah. And actually the most beautiful part of it was not that the company tapped so much capacity per se, but at a very human level, to feel like people were getting driven towards their passions, their interests, where they felt like they were contributing and being productive. That's the legacy I feel like I leave behind in my career as a CHRO. It's changing the world of work, and it's amazing. It's really fun. I love that, right? Like, here, we'll end on a high note. We're just like that, right? Like, that's yeah, go change the world. Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and I think that's exactly what we're getting at. And again, is technology the solution to everything? No, that's not the way you think about it. But can technology be an enabler to allow you to do some of this stuff at a scale and capability that just was physically impossible? There was no way you could do it. And I think that's the most exciting part. It's why I'm such an advocate for technology, is not that it's taking things over, but it's actually enabling us to do things for the betterment of people and organizations, right? It's no longer an us versus them. It's a, hey, we can do it both. So with that, I don't want to open another can of worms because we did end on a high note. So I don't want to jinx that. So we'll wrap it up. This has been awesome, Kelley. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We've had a great turnout for this. Hopefully everybody watching really enjoyed this and got something out of it and is encouraged about what the future of work can look like and how technology plays a key role in it. So have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Kelley, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody.